Okay, so let's talk about how to activate the nervous system in ways that it promotes more liberation, movement, mobilization of fat, and more oxidation of fat. So one of the most powerful ways to stimulate epinephrine, which is also called adrenaline, from these neurons that connect to fat and to thereby stimulate more fat mobilization and oxidation is through movement. But I'm not talking about exercise. The type of movement that I'm referring to is extremely subtle. And some of you may be familiar with this type of movement, but I'm guessing you're probably not familiar with what I'm about to tell you, which is that shiver or shivering is a strong stimulus for the release of adrenaline, epinephrine, into fat and the increase in fat oxidation and mobilization. But shiver is not just induced by cold, and there are other subtle forms of movement that can greatly increase fat metabolism and fat loss. People that bounce their knee, people that have a head bob while they're listening, people that nod a lot, people that stand up and sit down a lot throughout the day, and people that pace burn anywhere from 800 to 2,500 calories more than the control group in the experiments that they looked at. And indeed, there's been a modern look into all this, and these numbers check out, that simply moving around a lot, even if those are subtle movements, greatly increases the amount of energy that you burn. And people who overeat, the people who can have the second or the third donut or donuts at all and don't seem to put on weight to the same degree, they are people that move around a lot even when seated. They're people that will often move their limbs very quickly as well. There even have been studies that have explored other things that correlate with fidgeters. Fidgeters stand up very quickly at the end of a lecture, or they start to gather their things very quickly, whereas non-fidgeters don't. Simply moving a lot, being a fidgeter, bouncing your knee, standing up and pacing several times or many times throughout the day led to considerable amounts of fat loss and weight loss when people were ingesting the same amount of food. If they overate, they were able to compensate and burn off that food. And if they were trying to lose weight and they incorporated this fidgeting protocol of deliberately trying to fidget more and move around during the day, pace, stand up more quickly, sit down and stand up more often rather, they found that they greatly increased their weight loss, anywhere from 20 to 30% increases. And in some cases, there are always those few people who burned a lot more. It seems to work best in people who are already slightly overweight. So for people that are overweight, who are kind of averse to exercise, fidgeting might actually be a good entry point. Rothwell and Stock and others that they worked with subsequently found that these little fidgety movements, the engagement of certain aspects of our musculature that are nothing like exercise, it's not these large coordinated or rhythmic body movements, but rather subtle little bits of fidgety movement. And here I am doing a lot of fidgety movement as an example, tapping the pen, this kind of thing. I was probably that kid in class most of the time. I try not to do it to irritate people, but I was definitely a knee bouncer. I'm not particularly lean or not, but I was definitely, this is a common activity for me. People that do that sort of thing, it turns out that it's not the kind of caloric burn that we normally think of like, oh, you're running, lifting weights, swimming, yoga, etc. Those subtle movements of our core musculature, not just the core, but all our limbs and our musculature, those low-level movements, they trigger epinephrine release from these neurons, and they stimulate the mobilization of fat. And then that fat is oxidized at higher rates. Now, how can you do that? Well, if you get into cold water or an ice bath or a cold day, and you try and remain calm and resist shivering, you actually short-circuit this mechanism for increasing brown fat thermogenesis. The paper published in Nature shows that it is shivering itself that causes the brown fat to increase your burn rate and your metabolism. And it works like this. When you get into cold and you shiver, The shivering, that low-level movement of the muscle, those small movements, triggers the release of a molecule called succinate, succinate, succinate. And succinate acts on the brown fat to increase brown fat thermogenesis and fat burning overall. It actually increases body heat through this brown fat thermogenesis pathway. The answer here might be a little bit different than you might imagine. Most of you might think, oh, well, if 1 minute is good, 3 minutes is better, and if 3 minutes is better, then 10 minutes is best. But remember, the goal is to get the shiver-induced release of succinate so that succinate can trigger the brown fat. It turns out that if you want to trigger the shiver, what you want to do is to get into the cold and then get out of the cold, and typically not dry off, and then get back into the cold and out of the cold. That will definitely stimulate more shivering than just getting into the cold itself. And you want to get in until you just start to shiver, and then you want to get out and not dry off. Wait anywhere from 1 to 3 minutes and then get back into the cold. Now, you'll notice when you get back into the cold, it'll almost seem soothing. It might actually not induce shiver. It might take away the shiver that you had. So here's a potential kind of sets reps protocol that you can play with. Find a temperature that induces shiver for you. That's going to vary depending on your cold tolerance and how cold adapted you are. 1 to 3, maybe 5 times a week. Get in until or get under the shower or whatever it is until you start to shiver, genuinely shiver. Then, after about a minute or so, get out. Spend 1 to 3 minutes out, but don't dry off. Get back in for anywhere from 1 to 3 minutes, but try and access the shiver point again. And you might do 3 repetitions of that. So it's 3 times in and 3 times out total. Okay? That's a great starting place. And what you don't want to do is build up your tolerance to cold so fast that pretty soon you're able to resist the shiver, because remember, the shiver is the source of the succinate release that will trigger brown fat thermogenesis.